Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm John Whitehead with the Chico Avenue Neighborhood Association, and I'd like to thank all of the candidates for supervisor for District 2 and 3 for attending this evening. Deborah Lucero, Bob Evans, Larry Wall, Tammy Ritter, and Norm Rosine. Thank you very much. I have one little tiny disclaimer. Deborah Lucero is the Executive Director of BCAC TV, who is recording the event this evening, and it will be available on Channel 11. We don't know the date and time yet. The format tonight is we'll have an introduction. Each candidate will get 3 minutes for an introduction, and then we decided we'd come up with 5 questions. We provided the questions to the candidates. I have a few copies of those if anybody would like them in hard copy. The candidates will then draw a blind draw 1 to 5, and then that would correspond to the question and the answer. They get 4 minutes to answer that question, and then each of the additional candidates would have 1 minute to comment. So hopefully we'll wrap that up in an hour, and then I've got a few questions from the audience, and we'll let the candidates deal with that. So with that, let's get started. To begin with, pass the mic up here, and we'll start with.
Hello, my name is Deborah Lucero, and I am a longtime resident of Chico. I was born here. I just spoke to a couple of ladies in the audience that one of them actually went to school with my parents, who went to Chico State. So we have long roots going back in Oroville on my mom's side to 1860. Some of her relatives, my great-great-great-grandfather had the first hotel and store in Enterprise. And my great-great-grandfather, T.J. Lucas, was an agriculturalist and one of the first butchers in the area, over in that area, and he lived in Bidwell Bar. And so both of those places now are under Lake Oroville. I went to Chico State. I graduated with a degree in communications and with an emphasis in Latin American studies and Spanish. And my first job out of college was at a Hispanic lobbyist group in Washington, D.C. And that was a very interesting job, and it was where I pretty much learned how the political sausage is made. And Washington, D.C. is everything it's cracked up to be, so it was a very interesting opportunity. From there, I worked for newspapers. I was a journalist, and when I decided to start my family and I moved back to the Chico area, my first husband and I started a business. His father owned Austin's Home Furnishings, and we started a small futon business, Pizzazz Futons and Furnishings. And we sold futons, and a lot of people thought in the day that they were croutons. I always say that because people get those two things mixed up. And we manufactured organic cotton mattresses. So from there, I worked for a trade association, an international trade association, for 5 years. And then I was the head of the Butte County Economic Development Corporation for 5 years. And for the past almost 20 years, I have headed up 2 arts organizations, one in Redding and one in Chico, and 2 public access television stations, BCAC TV here in Chico, located downtown, and SCAC TV in Redding, also located downtown, where we provide digital media arts training for at-risk youth and citizens who are wanting to sharpen their skills and learn how to use their smartphones. So I am very much looking forward to this forum tonight. I became interested in becoming a supervisor after working in both communities in Shasta and Butte County, and comparing services and approaches and grant opportunities and the communities. And it excited me about opportunities here in Butte County, things that I think we could capitalize upon. So I want to bring that knowledge to Butte County and to the Office of Supervisor. Thank you.
Man, I'm way up here, aren't I? I'm Bob Evans, and I am also a candidate for District 3 for Butte County Supervisor. And I'm probably the oddball here because I don't have generations of people who were born and raised in Chico. I'm a Midwestern boy, and when I got in the Air Force, traveled all over the world, lived in some great places, lived in some not so great places, but ended up in Sacramento on my retirement. I met my wife, who was a native Chicoan, and she drugged my rear end to Chico. I was not happy about that, but guess what? It was the best decision. This was the best thing that ever happened to me. I've fallen in love with this community. So not being a native, I actually have some advantages. I've lived in some great cities: San Antonio, Texas, Fort Walton Beach, Florida, Panama City, Florida, Sacramento, and some overseas places too. So I've had the opportunity to compare communities and I haven't found anything to match what I found in Chico and Butte County for both vibrant communities and plenty of outdoor activities. So that is why I stayed. We raised our kids here. They're all Chico State graduates. They've all moved out of Chico to find meaningful employment, and that's something I want to talk about tonight is job opportunities for our kids, and so our grandkids can be close by. But we'll get to that, I hope, before this debate is over. My priorities: I'm a fiscal conservative for a long, long time. I was on the city council for a couple years in the minority and saw what extra spending can do to a city. Dig that hole, and they're still digging out of the hole in Chico that was created back 5-7 years ago. So I'm a fiscal conservative, and my top priority is obviously public safety. That's the job of every government, from the federal government down to the local government. Their primary responsibility is to create an environment where families can feel safe and comfortable and raise their kids. So that's my top priority. Jobs is right up there, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about other priorities as we go along, but I don't want to hold this mic any longer. I'll pass it on.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you for the opportunity. I grew up just a couple blocks from this school. Back in the 1940s and 50s, as I was growing up, I lived in District 2, what is now District 2, for all of that time. Went to Chico schools, Chico State, went into the Navy, spent 23 years as a Navy pilot, where I flew combat missions over North Vietnam and Laos, off aircraft carriers. After leaving the Navy, I reacquainted myself with my current wife, a childhood sweetheart, and we got married and came back to Chico and opened a business, the UPS stores, where we ran and operated for 25 years until we sold them just a few years ago. I have served on a Chico Planning Commission, Chico City Council, and am currently a county supervisor for District 2. My goals are to see our taxes and fees remain as low as possible, to promote free markets, opportunity, and the big issues that I see in Butte County are public safety, both sheriffs and fire, water, marijuana, both pro and con, medical and recreational, neither of which do I support. And I'm hoping at some point to get a chance to talk about what we can do at the county for customer service. The reason I run is because I enjoy serving our county residents, in particular helping them through the bureaucracy over in Oroville and getting permits, getting through entitlements, getting road signs, getting street signs, getting speed limit signs, helping a gentleman get a well drilled after having been without water for over a year. I help veterans with their needs, both in retrieving lost and stolen medals, as well as pay and benefits through our Veteran Service Office. I'm a member of Salvation Army Advisory Board, Butte Humane Society Board of Directors. I serve on the Love Chapman Coalition over in the other neighborhood. And I am active in most of the veterans organizations, VFW, American Legion, Vietnam Veterans, in service to the veterans and to our community. Thank you.
Almost lost my booster seat. My name's Tammy Ritter, and I'm running for Supervisor in District 3. I've been in Chico for about 20 years, and during that time I have worked almost exclusively in the social services field. I am the founding executive director of the Torres Community Shelter. For those of you who don't know, that's Chico's homeless shelter. And I went on to direct Habitat for Humanity of Butte County. I've been on the Community Housing Improvement Board in Chico for about 15 years and worked as an outpatient therapist for individuals with substance use disorders. I'm currently directing family court services out of Glynn County Superior Court, where I conduct mediations and child custody recommending reporting. These things tie very closely into what I'm interested in for the Board of Supervisors. I see the primary issues that we're facing as a community, our water policy and how we're going to deal with the new SGMA regulations. I see housing and our housing crisis, as well as the associated services with behavioral health as one of the major issues we're going to deal with as a community. And I see emergency preparedness as the other very significant issue. I served for 4 years on the Chico City Council, and I believe that the experience I gained on the council has given me both the skills and the experience to do this job. So look forward to the questions.
So last but not least, my name is Norm Rosine. I grew up in Chico. I went to local schools, Pleasant Valley High School graduate. Went to school at UC Davis, graduated with a degree in zoology and then a master's in physiology. Went to UC San Francisco, got a dental degree. I see some teachers in the audience, so I want to say that Pleasant Valley prepared me very well for college. Came back, started a dental practice. I was married just before I started dental school, so my wife and I came back, we started my practice. I practiced for 33 years in Chico. Along the way at Davis, we got interested in wine and winemaking, so we founded Odyssey Winery and Vineyards north of town. Planted a vineyard 27 years ago. We're actually the oldest use-permitted winery in Butte County, so we like to think we helped get the wine agricultural business going here in Butte County. Along the way, learned how to fly, served 2 terms on the Butte County Airport Land Use Commission, was the chair when the current airport compatibility plan for Butte County was created. That took 17 public hearings and we had to hire a consultant, so it's a good stepping stone or learning experience for the job of supervisor. Interested in flying, so helped to start the Chico Air Museum. This year the Air Museum is going to see 10,000 visitors, so we've gone since 2005 to now, from having just a patch of dirt to having quite a nice museum. If you haven't visited, I'm going to put in a plug for that. Got interested in technical rescue and joined the North Valley Animal Disaster Group. I'm a vice president and on the board of directors. I teach technical rescue around the world for the International Fund for Animal Welfare. So I've been to India, Indonesia. I was in Nepal in 2015 responding to the earthquake with the U.S. people there. I was in St. Thomas last year responding to Hurricane Irma, again doing rescue for animals and helping the people there. I'm running for supervisor because my hometown is changing and not for the better. And crime went up, violent crime went up 40% basically in 2017. My mom won't visit the park anymore. My mom won't go downtown to the city plaza anymore. I think that's wrong. I think we need to do something. I think we need some new leadership that has some fresh ideas. I want to work with the different groups that are involved and try to make things happen. That's what I've done with the North Valley Animal Disaster Group. That's what I've done with the Chico Air Museum. I think that I can do the same if I'm elected supervisor. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. So, you all have a copy of the questions up there? Okay. All right. So let's just, I got a hat here. We'll start, ladies first. Bob? Got my phone? Very good. Here you go. I can fix that. So, who's got number one? Deborah's number one. So I've got a couple of copies of the questions here. If you want to pass them around, I'm going to keep one for myself. I didn't make enough for everybody, but I'll read the question and then we'll give Deborah a chance to answer. So the first question is, what decisions made by the Butte County Board of Supervisors most directly affect the residents of the city of Chico, and what kind of decisions should be made with direct input from the citizens? And I'll give you the mic, Deborah, and we'll get started.
On the first part of that question about what decisions should be made by the County Board of Supervisors, there are many different decisions that are made by the supervisors, one being annexation, various land use policies, fire safety and coordination of services, cannabis, which is coming up, water, which is very important, and health and human services. And I just wanted to give an example of just one, just to give, since we're limited on time, but health and human services is a good place to start. More than 50% of the county's budget goes to health and human services, like behavioral health, public assistance, Department of Employment Services. So a good example of how the lack of those services can affect the general public is the lack of public toilets. We shouldn't have a public crisis around not having toilets, but we do. So it was so bad last year that Governor Brown actually declared an emergency, a crisis around this issue, because somehow hepatitis A got into the homeless population, and it is a highly contagious liver infectious hepatitis A. And it was, generally it's caused by poor hygiene and lack of access to clean bathrooms. And this can be exacerbated, of course, when you're homeless. So according to the CDC, last year, in California, San Diego had almost 600 cases. 402 of those ended up being hospitalized, and there were 20 deaths. Santa Cruz, 76 cases, 33 hospitalized, and 1 death. Los Angeles, 12 cases, 10 hospitalized, no deaths. But you get the idea. People are going to the hospital, people are dying, and it's costing money. So what I'm saying with this is, currently, with our budget being 51% and leaning towards mental health and behavioral health and these services right now that could have an effect on our homeless population, the county should be front and center on this issue. I really think it should. And I think it's moving in the right direction. But I'm curious about the efficacy of the programs that we currently have. I'm curious how our services coordinate with one another. I'm concerned about the lack of collaboration between jurisdictions and the county. We could be doing better. There are places across the country that are having the same issues. Iowa is one of them. A little state like Iowa has 99 counties. We have 58. They are taking a regional approach to this issue. They're looking at a program that basically says services for mentally ill, people that are ending up in hospitals and sometimes even ending up in jails, okay, because there's no other beds to hold these folks, shouldn't be more than 90 minutes apart. So they have actually created a statewide program that is working very well at this point. And people that are behind it, law enforcement, the hospitals, the jurisdictions, the citizens, because of the cost. And I was looking for a great quote that I had written down about this, because it was by a sheriff. And he basically said that it's really not a moral or ethical thing to house mentally ill people in jails. This isn't something that should be done. And it's not effective. It doesn't help the issue. It doesn't help the person. So I just wanted to take one example of what it means when the county can be front and center, utilizing its resources, utilizing the people who have special skills. And this is no small cost. Mental health can be the largest cost in any budget, especially when you look at psychiatric hospitals. But we don't have detox centers, we don't have mental health facilities, and I would like to create a model in the state, and I think we could in this area, because our situation hasn't gotten as bad as, say, Los Angeles or San Diego. Sorry, is that it?
That's it.
Oh boy, woo! That must have been good. Everybody's calling in.
I did that just for you. So we have 1 minute, is that right?
1 minute on top.
Okay, so we have to be selective, and I will. And I'll pick one of the subjects that Deborah raised, and that's public safety. And you know, the public safety in the county is certainly affects Chico. The county's on a very tight budget, and it looks like by the end of the year they're going to be on a tighter budget, and there may be some layoffs. Sheriff Honey is also going to closer. Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sheriff Honey's department is also going to take some hits, but being the man he is, he thinks he can get away with laying off a few of his administrative people and none of the deputies. So that's good news. That means we have a great guy in the sheriff's department. But on the fire side, we just closed Station 42. And if you really prioritize public safety as your top priority, you shouldn't be shutting down fire stations. They've also shut down some ones in some seasonal ones out in the forest, and I think that's wrong. I think when times get tough, it's time to make tough decisions at the county level. And if I'm elected, I will prioritize keeping these stations open so that we don't ever have a case like Santa Rosa had last year. Thank you.
For the record, I want to mention that I voted against closing Station 42. But decisions of the county supervisors, they affect a lot of decisions. Our sheriff, fire, mutual aid, salaries, our clerk recorder in the polling places and voting, Department of Employment and Social Services, services to our residents and employment opportunities. Our library, which is near and dear to my heart, is greatly affected by everything that the Board of Supervisors does budget-wise. Public health, restaurants, opioids, restaurant grading, that's a county function. Opioids, which is a huge problem here, is being addressed by the county, and we have directed Andy Miller, our doctor, to take that on as his first priority. He's spending nearly 50% of his time on the opioid issue, and he's conducting a seminar this month over at Butte College to address that very issue of the Butte Glen. And also direct input from the citizens. Everything that the county votes on should be addressed by the city and the county citizens to make sure everybody's voice is heard.
So I'm going to address that last part as well. The last part of the question is what kind of decision should be made with direct input, and I agree with Larry that every single aspect of what government does should be addressed by the citizens. The issue that I think is going to be the most important, again, I'm going to go back to SIGMA, because that is our Groundwater Management Act, and unless the citizens have a seat at the table, all of the decisions that are made regarding groundwater will be made without citizen input. They will be made with the large well users and the farmers and the ag folks making those decisions for us. So that's the one thing that I think is going to be the most critical, that we have just everyday users of water sitting at that table.
I'm going to go back to what Larry said. There's a lot of things that the county does that affect the city. I'm sorry. Thank you. And I brainstormed this list that's half a page long, and I'm not going to list it. But really what it comes down to is the future growth of this city depends on where the county puts things. And that's how Chico has grown. Where the county has started neighborhoods, that's where the city has grown. That's how annexation occurs. So the city and the county have to look at the general plans and coordinate them so that down the road, 20, 30, 50 years from now, all of this is going to work. Traffic is affected. The recharge zones for the water that we're talking about is all in the county for the city. So it's critical that the two work together. It's critical that we have an understanding of what's going to happen in the future so that it makes some sense down the road.
So question number 2, that's you. And question number 2 is, do you support, will you defend the Green Line as it now exists? If not, why?
So I think we've been at 3 forums, and this question is exactly the same every single time. So I know what everyone's going to say. We all support the Green Line. It's a good thing. I'm the only one up here that actually lives on agricultural land. I'm the only one up here that actually grows the product, which is grapes. I totally get it, because when we're spraying sulfur, which is either if you have an organic vineyard or a non-organic vineyard, you're going to spray sulfur. Every grape vineyard in California gets sulfur to prevent powdery mildew. People get alarmed when they see spray coming up off of a rig. I would too. I want to know what's going on. I want to do it safely. So there can be compatibility issues between farming and city life. That's why the Green Line exists. It exists to draw a line in the sand where farming begins and where the city ends. And I support that 100%. It makes sense. Would I never ever adjust the Green Line here or there? Yeah, I think there could be tweaks. There are times when a use is no longer valid or the soils aren't good, but it would be very, very minor, and I think everybody would kind of go along with that. The whole purpose of the Green Line is to protect those deep alluvial soils that we have that are so rare. And if we're going to build something, let's build it on some cruddy soils. And that's pretty much what I would say. And as someone who has farmed, I get it. I would mention that I was on the Airport Land Use Commission, and there's a similar compatibility issue around airports, in that airports have operations that bother people, and there needs to be a buffer. And the Green Line serves as that demarcation line for agriculture.
I'm forced to agree with you, Norm. I would defend the Green Line as it currently exists. I think that one of the benefits that it gives us is the 300-foot setback between the agricultural zone and the residential. And it's irreplaceable fertile soil. It's not the place for us to be building subdivisions. And when I was on council, we were faced with that decision because we had a housing development that was going in behind the nut hauling plant. And we had to make a decision because there was not going to be sufficient abatement of the dust. And we made the decision, despite the fact that we need housing and we are in a housing crisis, we made the decision to defend the Green Line and to protect the agricultural uses.
My answer to the question is yes and yes. Insofar as the Green Line and 300-foot setback, the setback now has a loophole in it which allows some building to be closer than 300 feet from agriculture or the Green Line. We at the board are going to bring that up later this summer and have a discussion and a vote on whether to make it a solid 300 feet or leave the exception in it.
Well, it's hard to deviate from that yes and yes, so I'll say ditto, ditto. But there is a provision within the ordinance that says it should be reviewed every 5 years, and I foresee no reason to change it. But over the long haul, I'm sure there might be a tweak here or a tweak there, and I wouldn't be against that. But again, I fully support the Green Line as it exists today. And the problem is, in the future, there's going to be more and more pressure brought to bear to build development on the other side of the Green Line. And that is because Chico is surrounded by ag land and viewshed land, and there are so many restrictions on where we can build homes for future people who are coming here to keep up with the demand, that there will be pressures against to more than tweak the Green Line. I'm just prognosticating that, but As long as I'm on the board, the green line will be safe.
Well, I will have to say that my opponent, Larry Wall, has voted in favor of tweaking the green line on at least 2 occasions. And if you've ever seen the green line on a map, it's very jagged. It's not a straight line, it's very jagged, and that jaggedness represents what you might think of a district when they're trying to figure out how do we draw this line. And it's jagged because it was a huge political fight 40 years ago to even get that green line in place. And so what it's protecting is once it's tweaked, we all know how tweaking goes. You tweak it a little, it becomes a lot. And so I think that it is a line in the sand, as Norm said. I think that once we begin to start tweaking, there goes that line. So I am very much in favor of keeping the green line as it stands, and I'll be interested in that discussion this summer. Thank you.
And now we're to question number 3. Tammy? And so let me read the question. Necessary health services are provided by ML Hospital. One service that impacts hospital emergency departments is 5150. So pardon me for those who don't understand what a 5150 is. I got a little description. 5150s are the evaluations of persons who may be a danger to themselves or others or are gravely disabled. The 2011-2012 grand jury found these evaluations were a major cost to local hospitals, created a dangerous work environment for the emergency department staff, and were poorly coordinated with local law enforcement agencies and Butte County Behavioral Health Services. How would you handle this and equally complex health and human services issues?
So the first thing I want to say about this question is that I think what 5150, and it's very often misunderstood. People think it is a clinical determination or diagnosis, and it is not. It's to facilitate access to that diagnosis or to that testing. And so when we're looking at the relationship between Enloe Hospital and Butte County Department of Behavioral Health, what we have to consider is that the hospital is not set up as a mental health facility. So they have an MOU with Butte County Department of Behavioral Health, and they have received funding in the past. They've received grants. They cover things like the hospital triage team and the homeless shelter triage team, the Crisis Connect, which is a call center. And all of those things are put in place to attempt to reduce the amount of people who are needing to be in a locked facility. With our health and human services, I think that what we're going to need to do is, one, we're going to need to continue to apply for grants because we don't have the beds in Butte County. We found after we put this triage personnel grant into effect that we did see a decrease in the amount of people who were 5150'd, but we also saw an increase in the amount of people who were leaving the county to go to locked facilities, because we have a 16-bed psychiatric hospital facility, and that is not sufficient or adequate for what we need in Butte County. Some of the other issues that have to do with that is, as someone mentioned before, we don't have a detox facility. We don't have any kind of medically supervised facilities to take care of people while they are under the influence, and those are all things that are frequently misdiagnosed or are brought to the hospital. So if we're looking at wanting to reduce the amount of people, we have to look at increasing the services so that we're meeting all of the needs. And then the other thing is that 10% of the people, it's a little bit more than 10% of the people that were served at the ER for behavioral health issues were served more than 5 times in 1 year. And so that points to us having a real lack of services to deal with crisis. So my priority is going to be, I keep saying we need to have housing first, and we need to have harm reduction. We need to make sure that we are offering people the highest level of services that we possibly can to reduce the impact both on law enforcement as well as on the hospitals and the behavioral health hospitals. Were you waving your hand at me? Oh, okay. Trying to talk really fast. Okay.
Okay, over the past few years, Butte County has implemented a crisis stabilization unit over at the old Enloe Hospital in Cohasset and Rio Linda. Provides emergency services for community members in crisis, walk-ins, residential triage team to go to Enloe ER when necessary. Also, just recently implemented the mobile crisis team in cooperation and coordination with the Chico PD. They've had several events over the past month that it's been in effect. We also have a grant to provide those kinds of services to the sheriff in southern Butte County. The CIT, or Critical Incident Training with law enforcement for encounters with the mentally ill persons, has begun. Medication-assisted treatment for opioids, overdoses, heroin, meth, alcohol are all underway and in work right now. We have an expanded drug enforcement training program for drugs and alcohol services to provide to the AB 109 parolees who are many in our community now. And we also now have a full-time mental health counselor at the jail.
I want to take on a little bit on what Tammy talked to, and that was the PUF unit, the 16-bed unit where the 5150 people can be set for 72 hours for observation and evaluation. The good news is the county is hoping, if they get the money, to start a second 16-bed unit, and that would tremendously help this situation we have with the emergency room with the hospital. They can get a second bed. Right? They do it for a couple reasons. They need the capacity, but also there are so many patients now that, and we only have 16 beds, we have to send them out to other facilities. Down to Yuba, they have a PUF unit there too. But the cost is over twice as much to send somebody out to another facility than what our own facility can do. So it's a cost reduction benefit to us. It provides more services for the homeless, and it's just something we need. One other thing, the county, I've been told by Darian Cottrell, who's the head of behavioral health, that we have open positions that we cannot fill. Psychiatry positions, psychology positions, mental health nurses that we cannot fill because we're not a rich county and they get much more money either in private practice or elsewhere. The good news is the county's working with UC Riverside to see if we can set up a psychology resident program right here in Butte County, and that would bring residents in for 2 years, their second year and their third year, and hopefully if they've lived here for a couple years, they'll fall in love with Butte County like the rest of us have, and we get more capacity from this program.
That's exciting to hear. I would like to see a little more planning around this entire issue. I think that we are reacting to the issue a lot by saying, okay, let's do this or let's do this, but I haven't seen a real good planning concept for the entire county. How effective is what we're doing now? How many people are we serving? Are we collaborating in the best possible way? I haven't seen a lot of reports on that. I don't see a report out on the effectiveness of what we're doing. I see a lot of results of what isn't happening in the downtown plaza by the escalating incidents that we have. And I think that what the track we're on is good in trying to address some of these things. But I would like to see an overall comprehensive approach, and I think that begins by getting everybody at the table. Law enforcement, mental health providers, the county, the cities. This is a big issue, and up in Reading, that's how they're tackling it. I've been at meetings there where they have 24 different agencies around one table, and they're talking about how do we most effectively do this? How do we engage technology? How do we prevent the issues before they happen? Not just knee-jerk reactions to when they are happening. So I'd like to see better planning.
So I went to dental school at UC San Francisco, which is just up the street from Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. And in our emergency clinic there, we saw quite a few mentally ill and drug-addled people from the 60s. And we learned how to deal with those people. And I think it takes kind of a carrot and a stick approach. There has to be some physical I won't say threat, but you need an enforcer sometimes in order to protect and keep people safe. But most of the time, hopefully all of the time, you're going to use just general behavioral techniques to be able to work with people. And that's what we did at the dental school. We didn't have law enforcement there. We just worked with the people, found out what was going on in their lives, and were able to get the job done. I think that what Tammy said is right on. We have some needs, and what Larry said is right on. We have budget issues, and we're working towards it. I read the whole report that question was based on, and since 2011-12, we've done a lot in trying to improve the situation. And I think it's going to continue, and I see the city and the county working together to make that happen because it's becoming such an issue with the citizens of the county and the city. Thank
you, everybody. So, just a little aside, Enmo sits right smack in the middle of the Avenues neighborhood, so we feel that impact. Who's got 4? Okay, Larry. So, number 4 is, what should the Board of Supervisors be doing, if anything, to address the problems of homelessness, poverty, and housing shortages in Butte County? Please give some concrete examples.
Well, the first part of that, homelessness. Obviously, homeless implies no home, no house, no place to live. Butte County, only 39% of the population can afford the median income home, or the median price home, and that is $308,000 today. Very few people can do that. So something else has to be done. And to get more home sites, we need more land. To get more land, we need to branch out a little bit. The land inside Chico is pretty well filled up or being filled up, and the price of land has skyrocketed from where it was even 10 years ago. So the more land we can make available, the better opportunity we have for reduced price, along with expedited entitlements, permitting, and that sort of thing. Now, Butte County is active in the No Place Like Home and has a $100,000 technical assistance to help mentally ill get into local apartments. The county works with CHAT and with the Chico Homeless Task Force to assist with utilities, zoning, permitting, social services, and behavioral health. So that addresses part of the housing issue. There's obviously more. Poverty, that's a result of lack of jobs. The employment nationally is down about 4.1%. Butte County is only another % higher. So jobs are becoming scarce, and jobs are scarce. That means there's not enough employment available. We need more industry. We need more jobs brought to Butte County, and that's a marketing issue. We need to work on that. Our housing shortage, again, more land. Simplify the entitlement process, and also I think it's time we consider the tiny house program that has been successful in a few other places, and I would support that depending on 3 things: the location, the proper administration and enrollment into those units, and the operational care of those units. But those things have to be done right. The land has to be in the right spot. And I'm confident that will get worked out. In fact, I dare say the council will be addressing that in a roundabout fashion tonight. Thank you.
Sure. So the first thing that I would do as supervisor to address the issue regarding housing and homelessness is that I think that the county needs to make sure that all of the cities remove all of the punitive ordinances around homelessness. We currently have a sit-lie ordinance, and we also have a protection of our waterways ordinance, which actually affect our continuum of care. That group of 20-plus service providers that you're wondering about is a continuum of care, and they are all the homeless and housing advocates and social services. And they get dinged $50,000 a year because we have these punitive ordinances in Chico. So that's $50,000 less a year that we are able to spend on homeless outreach, on supplies, on reaching people where they are. So I think that we need to perhaps declare a housing crisis and offer services such as Housing First and harm reduction measures And I think that incentivizing affordable housing, not through inclusionary zoning, but through just reducing fees would work. And I think that there's not going to be one solution. It's going to be multiple solutions. Self-help housing, tiny housing.
It is going to be a comprehensive program. Thanks, Mom. It's going to be we need a comprehensive program for homeless, and I think we're working towards that. I think there does need to be accountability. I'm going to take a different tack and talk a little bit about what Larry said about economic development. Right now, we're losing jobs in Chico. We had the Google Loon project. I don't know how many of you know about that, high altitude balloons that Google was launching from Chico. If we could have kept that balloon launching center here, it would have meant millions of dollars down the road. We had Facebook's laptop and cell phone distribution center here. They left. Why did they both leave? Because we don't have commercial air service. Enloe has problems attracting physicians to work in certain departments because people come here and they go, "Where's your airline? I had to drive up." So I've been working with Jet Chico for the last 3 years as the only effort in town to try to attract commercial air service. If we can do that, we will improve the infrastructure for businesses, we will attract some of the tech companies from the Bay Area, and we will gain more professionals.
So in my conversations with heads of departments at the county, it was made very clear to me that the county is in the business of providing services and the cities are in the business of providing housing. So, did you get that? The cities are in the business of providing housing, the counties are in the business of providing services. As it relates to homeless, there's a very interesting discussion going on tonight at the City Council. I'm surprised some of you aren't there. And it has to do with moving the Jesus Center to a location where they actually can provide consolidated services to those in need. According to the people at Behavioral Health, they think this will be a great benefit for them because they don't have to go looking under every bridge to find their patients or the people that they're trying to serve. There's a central location where services can be provided, where maybe housing can be provided, and meals and so forth, and they think that would be a real benefit to the service side. Real quick on the housing side, I want to just educate you on something I've learned. In December, the state passed several laws that would streamline the process for making affordable housing. They've suddenly realized, oh my God, we have a housing shortage, and now we have to change the laws to support that. So they've streamlined processes. They've made it predictable. They've taken out some of the expense and time to build houses. And then in their infinite wisdom to support the homeless, they turn around and say, oh, by the way, if you want to take benefit of this program, you have to pay your employees prevailing wage. And if you don't know what prevailing wage is basically the wages that unions have negotiated, and we're tied to San Francisco. So we would have to take advantage of those streamlines. Our builders would have to pay union San Francisco wages to their employees. And a little other thing they put in that law is you have to be professionally trained to work on these houses. Well, guess what that does? One of our favorite nonprofits is Habitat for Humanity. You could no longer have people doing sweat equity on their homes under this law. So if there's an exception to that, I have not heard that. But basically, all our builders would ignore those laws because they can build houses cheaper, paying Chico wages.
So I'm going to take a little different take on all of it, and that is that in this room, we're all a little bit older, but I know that the millennials are not interested in living in those houses that are $308,000 median home price. Many want to go up. They would like to see more upward building in Chico in our infill. They are living different lifestyles. Some of them don't have cars. They don't want cars. So I really believe that we need, a comprehensive report on what is currently happening with our housing stock. what Bob was saying is true with what the state has done. And single resident occupancy units, remember the old days when there used to be boarding houses and people could have one room in a boarding house? Those types of facilities don't exist here. I think we have two, Tammy, two that are similar to that, but they're not truly boarding house type places. Tiny houses should all be considered in the mix, and then something that's very relevant to the avenues and to the streets are the granny units. They are basically saying, hey, look at those second units behind the home, and hopefully there will be reduction in some of the fees so those become reasonable to build or enhance behind your home.
So question number 5 is, should Butte County encourage development in the unincorporated areas around Chico? And do you support the annexation of those areas by the city of Chico? And how can we identify and resolve some of the problems of annexation?
So, based on what I said in the last question, it's still true. The county is not in the business of building homes. The county is in the business of providing services. They delegated all the home building to the city. So the county encouraging development in unincorporated areas, I don't know if that's an apropos question. But I did pull out some numbers that are quite interesting. Today, if you include Marion Park, if you include Oak Valley, if you include Stonegate, I don't know if you know about Stonegate, but that's a new development. That's going to be one of the biggest developments in Chico. It's down it's down off of Bruce Road all the way down to the Skyway. If you add all the houses that all those are building, plus all the other permits that are in place in Chico, you have about 3,161 homes going to be built over the next 5. Some of these developments take much longer than 5 years. 3,000. If you go to the general plan, by 2030, there's going to be need for 16,376 new homes. That is just to keep up with the demand of people coming to Chico. BCAC, or the Butte County Association of Governments, has a different estimate, and that is we'll need 7,039 new homes. Even at that, the difference is another 3,878 homes are going to have to be built. Where is that going to happen? I think we're trying to squeeze in as many homes, as many granny units, as many build-ups as we can, but the fact is we're going to have to take more land and spread it out a little bit. Chico's going to grow, and whether you build the houses or not, people are still going to come. So we need more housing, and as Larry said, we need more dirt available to put these houses on, because if there's very little dirt, that dirt becomes very expensive as home builders compete for that land so they can build the necessary homes to support our population. So, and there's a process going through right now to evaluate of the land set aside within the Chico boundary is how many homes can we really put on it after you take out all the land for environmental purposes. And so they're going to come up with a number that says, well, our capacity right now is this many houses. And I don't know what that number is, but it's certainly not going to allow us to add another 7,039 homes to the Chico area. We're going to grow. We don't. That's why I said there's going to be pressures to break the green line. We do not want to grow to the west. We need to grow to the east, to the south, and to the north. And everybody needs to understand that it's going to happen, maybe not in our lifetime, but it's going to happen. What's this next?
So as far as encouraging development in the unincorporated areas, Chico has approximately 90,000 people that live in the city limits. In the unincorporated area, there are about 80,000 people that live in that unincorporated area. So there's already substantial growth in that unincorporated area, and that's causing some of the pressures that we feel in terms of fire safety and policing and some of the other things that are becoming imminent problems for our county. So I really do support the annexation of the areas for instance, Chapmantown, which has been on the books for 20 years. But Chapmantown has literally stayed the way it is. There are no drains, there's no sidewalks, there's no, they are still primarily on septics. There is some sewer through there. But we've all known that this place is going to be annexed for 20 years. And I haven't seen much movement on the county side. And it's apparent from meetings that the city, as strapped as it is not going to be able to do much for those folks either. So these are real issues. How do you annex places and give them the services that they might expect if you come into the city?
Encourage development in the unincorporated areas around Chico, yes. Support the annexation of these areas by the city of Chico, yes. About 15 years ago, I proposed that the building of homes in the county be done at city standards. So when they did get annexed in, they would be compatible with the city services and sewer, police, fire, streets, lights, all of that stuff. It went nowhere. The county wanted no part of it, and ultimately the city wanted no part of it. So it didn't get anywhere. But I think if building is going to take place in the unincorporated area, it has to be done very similar or like the requirements within the city. As far as identifying and resolving issues of annexation, that's what we have LAFCO, the Local Area Formation Commission, for, is to do exactly that. And that does that with public hearings that all of us can attend, as well as the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors when annexation does take place. So it requires all of us to participate in our local government to make sure these things happen, or at least to get our voices heard in the way the outcomes transpire. So go to the meetings, particularly those that affect you. Make the point of emailing, writing, attending meetings, filling out questionnaires about the annexation and the areas to come into the city. Thank you.
Yes, Butte County should encourage development in the incorporated areas with the intention of annexation where that's appropriate. Part of the regional development plan should be looking at the growth areas, and we should be working with LAFCO to identify the areas that might become problematic in the future. Something that we haven't talked a lot about is the nitrate action plan, which we know we need to be paying attention to this, yet we don't pay attention to it. It's a huge issue in a lot of areas of Chico, and because of the nitrates, we can't build in those areas, and a lot of times can't even sell the land. So I think that we need to be looking at nitrate impacted areas the same way that we looked at deferred maintenance.
My wife's father was the architect for the city of Oakland, and when he retired up here to be closer to us in the 80s, he was surprised at 40 plus areas that needed to be annexed within the city limits. He couldn't understand how services could be provided within all those islands, and he makes perfect sense. He's still alive today at 96. He just stopped flying airplanes at 95. So he's a smart guy, and it doesn't make any sense, and we need to create an urban core, but the county should develop outside because that's the right of the county to do so, and we need the houses. But I like Larry's idea of making them up to city standards because eventually they're going to be annexed. It's just like evolution. That's what's going to happen. So why don't we look ahead and be proactive about that? And I think it would work better down the road for everyone. I do want to take the chance to say thank you to all of you for being here, since this might be the last time we get to talk.
And I'd like to say thank you to all of the candidates and your time this evening. And I do have a couple of questions, and if anybody else has any. I have one directed towards Mr. Wall. I can read it out loud. Mr. Wall, please explain why you consider marijuana revenue, fees, and taxes to be dirty money.
I think the revenue that comes off recreational marijuana, first of all, if you want to tax it, you got to take it to the voters. Second, I don't think we could raise enough money off fees to do any good. The problem with recreational marijuana, as Colorado, Washington, and a number of other places, including Stanislaus County, who reversed themselves on marijuana, is that the revenue received doesn't take care of the revenue that will need to be expended policing and supervising the commercial marijuana growing. So it's just a bad deal, and at the present juncture, I don't believe there's any way that we need to get into that. The board has come to a very good balance and a compromise on both medical and recreational marijuana, and it's working well. We have a lot of commercial and large growers leaving the county looking for greener pastures, if you will, to grow. So we're doing the right thing. The code enforcement people are working hard. The sheriff is working hard to make sure that neighbors are able to enjoy their homes in peace and quiet.
So, would any of the rest of you like to comment, or not?
Yes, I would. I respectfully disagree. I do think there needs to be cost recovery, but it absolutely does not need to be a tax. And the same way that we regulate alcohol is the same way that we could be regulating adult use cannabis. It does not need to be a tax that's passed by the voters. So I think that the fact that we have so many medical patients that are traveling up to Shasta Lake or traveling to Berkeley or traveling to Oakland shows that there is a real need here. And because we do not have a policy that addresses things such as production and transportation, these people cannot legally obtain their medicine in Butte County, and I think that's a travesty.
And also the current program that we do have in the county, last year there was just a report given at one of the supervisors meetings, and last year there was about $2 million that were put in liens on property because it's become a land use issue, a policy issue, if you will. And so what they've collected though on those $2 million of liens is $168,000. And there was no report on the expenditures, how much it cost them to get the $2 million in liens. So I would like to see cost effectiveness. You know, is it effective use of the code enforcement time to go out and eradicate all of these things? What's it costing in court time, in you know, the code enforcement time, all of the people involved? And what does that chain look like? I'm curious about that, and I'd like to see a report on that.
So I'll put my 2 cents worth in since I don't want to be left out. And the bottom line is, I agree with what the Board of Supervisors has done. I think they're on the right track. We take this slow, we take it cautious. We try and get rid of the bad players. And that subject is not going to go away. It's going to come up in front of the Board of Supervisors many times over the next 10 years. And we will see from other counties and other jurisdictions how successful they are in their support of recreational cannabis or not.
So as a healthcare provider, I treat a lot of patients that lost teeth and lost entire dentitions because of drug abuse. And I talk to them during their visits, and a lot of them started with marijuana. There's 2 kids in my practice that were 5 and 6 when they started with me 30 years ago. They'd be in their mid-30s. They're both dead today because they got involved with drugs. I look at recreational marijuana as just a real problematic thing. I don't equate it to alcohol because beer and wine are foods and smoking marijuana is not. There's really good studies that show what it does to young brains. I run in the park almost every day and I see young kids, high school, young college kids smoking marijuana, and I know that they're not doing good things for their brains. So I look at it from a medical standpoint and I just don't see it being efficacious or useful.
Thank you, everybody. I have one additional question.
Excuse me, is it permissible to follow up a question with the request?
Well,
I want to see the studies. You're saying that you can't do it right now, but I'd like you to make them available somewhere online, email address.
So can I make a suggestion? If you'll provide Norm your email address, I'm speaking out of turn
Fair
here.
enough.
Fair enough?
Listen, I've read this literature intensely for a decade.
No, we're going to take this offline. Thank you. So the last question I have that was submitted from the audience is been talked about indirectly this evening already in a lot of different ways, but is, do you support the implementation of Laura's Law that would provide wraparound services to the severely and chronically mentally ill? And so I think since we're on schedule to wrap this thing up, I'll give each of you an opportunity to respond to that.
So, Tammy is by far the expert on Laura's Law, and I think that we need to take a look at it. We need a lot of arrows in our quiver to deal with the problems of mental illness, homelessness, drug addiction, and Laura's Law might be one tool that would be useful. Again, that's not my bailiwick. I've heard Tammy do a great talk on Laura's Law at another forum, but I'm, again, looking at comprehensive answers to solve the challenge of homelessness. And I want to say something that I did a dental project with the Jesus Center a few years ago where I treated homeless patients and fixed their teeth so that they could get jobs. And in doing that, working one-on-one with these patients, I learned a whole lot. There's a huge variety of homeless. Okay, the reasons for homelessness are many and varied, and we need to address each of those groups differently. You cannot lump them all together. And I think that's why we need a comprehensive approach using law enforcement, behavioral health, and target teams to engage the homeless and the mentally ill on the street so that we can get them to safety, showing compassion, but also having some accountability so that people can walk downtown and not expect to be hassled.
Well said. So I think that Laura's Law is a tool that we need, and I think that we have to figure out a way that we can fund it. And to date, all of that funding responsibility has pretty much fallen with Butte County Department of Behavioral Health. But when we look at who is going to benefit financially, it's going to reduce the burden on our legal system, it's going to reduce the impact on our emergency room visits, and it's likely going to have a positive impact on law enforcement as well when they're not having to respond to emergencies. So as we're looking for funding mechanisms for it, I think that we need to be looking at judicial counsel, and we need to be looking at specialty court grants from them. I think that we need to be talking to the hospital and talking about what kinds of savings they would be realizing if they didn't have the same percent of people coming back over and over again. And I think that we need to be looking at one position with the Sheriff's Office or Chico PD because of all of the time that it's going to save in emergency response.
Sometime back, I asked the board to consider Laura's Law. I still agree that Laura's Law has a place in Butte County. When we took it to the board asked the staff to research it and bring back a recommendation. They did, and based on the comments from behavioral health, the sheriff, the DA, the court system, the public defender, Department of Employment and Social Services, it was decided that at this time, the cost was prohibitive for Butte County to engage in it. Only 17 other counties in the state are utilizing it, only 4 have made any reports. So it's pretty much in its infancy still. So I intend to bring it back again when I'm convinced that the cost can be structured such that we can afford it. Behavioral health has approximately $67 million budget, and you would think we could squeeze a little bit of money out of that. However, behavioral health also started all these other programs recently, including the Crisis Stabilization Unit, the Mobile Crisis Team, there's a critical incident training, the expanded drug enforcement and the counselor at the jail, all those have been implemented since Laura's Law was passed. And so the costs are just not to be made up at this time. So we'll get it back and we'll take another look at it.
Well, the good answers are already been given. I don't think anybody doubts that if we had Laura Law provisions in here in Butte County, it would help. But the big issue for behavioral health in the other departments is lack of funds to do that, plus all the other stuff they're asked to do, required to do, volunteer to do. So it is on a list that hasn't reached the point where the budget will allow it. If I'm lucky enough to be a supervisor and get a little bit further knowledge on the budget, maybe we can figure out how to implement it. There's no doubt it would help in many cases in this county.
Well, my answer goes back. I'm in favor of Laura's Law. I would like to study more of the costs. I think it is an essential tool for families who are really there is no other option for them. Again, this goes back to what do those budgets look like? How effective are those programs? A couple of the ones that Larry mentioned are brand new programs. So we won't know their effectiveness, and they are grant funded. So that's not really part of the 67 million that was mentioned. That's on top of that. So I think we need a more comprehensive approach. You know, even in enacting Laura's Law, would that be slapping another Band-Aid on without looking at how is this weaving through the entire mental health community? How does it intersect with law enforcement? How does it intersect with the hospitals? What makes the most sense? And I would love to see meetings around that and citizen involvement in those talks. I've been to the Laura's Law, a couple of the Laura's Law meetings. I think they're extremely informative. I wish more people would go to understand how deep these mental issues truly run. And something that Tammy said is very interesting about 10% of the visits to the hospital. Was that what you were saying? 10% of those people had been 5 times or more. Those are the candidates for Laura's Law. Those are the people that are revolving in and out of jail or in and out of hospital and costing us the most resources. So that's when a law like that comes into being very useful. So I'm in favor, but again, I would like to look at a more comprehensive approach to all of these things surrounding mental health.
In a nutshell, what's Laura's Law? I'm not familiar with that. In a nutshell, just quick.
Sandy, do you want to take this one? So it's a collaborative approach. So if you have someone who has a chronic mental illness and they have not been successful receiving services, it's basically kind of an intersection between law enforcement, the court system, and behavioral health, and it's wraparound services. So it walks the person through. There's some discussion that there's a little bit of the black robe effect, that just standing in front of a judge impacts someone to be able to, kind of make the changes. But it's also that they're offered the services, and they're offered the services without barrier. So if they're using substances, they're offered housing, and they don't have to get clean in order to get into that housing. Or if they're not stable on their medications, they don't have to get stable first before they're put into housing.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to again thank all of our candidates for their time this evening. I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight and participating in democracy, which is a worthwhile venture. And with that, good evening, and if you do have any questions about Cana, please check out our website. Thank you.